They say in order to become stronger, you must confront those that torment you the most. So today, I'm going to be talking about the architects of my suffering, Indonesia. However, I do have one request though, before we start this video. Now this goes out to all the Indonesians that watch this channel or know of this channel. Even though you annoy me every single international window, I have always admired the way that you guys can come together on the internet. I've seen players and clubs gain hundreds of thousands of followers in just a few hours. You gave iShow Speed over 1 million concurrent viewers. And recently, this video popped up on my front page. This had 11,000 views in the first 5 days. So I ask of you of this one simple request in exchange for this video. As some of you may know, judging from the shirt that I'm wearing, I am a big Nicki fan. I also just got this from a viewer of mine. Thank you so much. So I need you all to go to our Instagram account, go to our most recent post, and comment, "Indonesia loves @Macwell. Please follow him back." I know what you are all capable of, so I need all of you. Perhaps the entire country. I even unblocked you, Extra Time Indonesia. I promise you, it was just a bit for a live stream. I promise. And listen, if she does follow me back on Instagram, I will not hesitate to wear an Indonesia shirt on a video. Hell, I might go to Jakarta and wear one. Anyways, our story begins in 1919 when the Nederlands-Indisch Voetbalbond was founded in Indonesia, or as it was known during colonial rule, the Dutch East Indies. Throughout the next decade, Dutch East Indies played matches against Singapore, Australia, China, where they drew once and won twice. All the while, the PSSI was formed in 1930. The Dutch often controlled all aspects of Indonesian life, including sports. So this federation, aka the All Indonesia FA, was formed to be free of Dutch influence, a symbolism of a larger resistance to colonial rule. Then in 1934, they participated in the Far Eastern Games. Here they played Japan for the first time and fried them 7-1 with 2 players getting hat-tricks. Although the NIVB had put together teams for matches prior, this is considered the first official match for the Indonesian national team. Speaking of the NIVB, they liquidated just a year later and were replaced by the NIVU and the PSSI, who both merged together. However, the NIVU was the official FA of the Dutch East Indies and became a member of FIFA in 1936. 2 years later, the Dutch East Indies became the first Asian nation to qualify for the World Cup, and this was after doing, and I'm not even kidding, nothing. Japan withdrew, and as a result, they were forced to face the US in a playoff, who also withdrew. The Dutch East Indies' time in the tournament didn't last long, however, as they lost to Hungary 6-0 in the first round. Shortly after, World War II arrived, and the PSSI was dissolved by the Japanese during its occupation of the land in 1942. After the Second World War, though, the Dutch East Indies gained its independence from the Dutch, and the PSSI was revived in 1950 and became a member of FIFA 2 years later. Now officially known as Indonesia, the national team qualified for the 1956 Olympics, where they managed to hold the eventual champion Soviet Union to a goalless draw. 1 year later, led by Andi Ramang, one of Indonesia's most influential players of the 20th century, Indonesia advanced to the second round of qualifiers but withdrew because they refused to play Israel. And unfortunately, this would be the closest they get to qualifying for a long time. However, during the 1970s as well, Indonesia would see the golden years of Abdul Qadir and Izwadi Idris, both regarded as some of the greatest Asian players of all time. The two also played in a match versus Pele Santos in Jakarta back in 1972. Speaking of, I'm actually going to be doing another trip to Asia this fall, and I've thought about actually making a trip to Jakarta for the first time in my life. But one thing I've always hated about international traveling is having to switch a SIM card just to have connection in the country. I mean, I just got off a long flight, man. I don't want to wait in line all tired with my luggage. I already did that with immigration. This is the last thing I want to do right now. Fortunately, I don't have to worry about this hassle anymore thanks to today's sponsor, Saily. Saily is a new eSIM service app, which means you no longer have to physically swap cards anymore. All you have to do is download the Saily app and you can choose from several eSIM plans in over 160 countries, and you'll be guaranteed a reliable connection from the best networks. Now, your service provider has a similar feature, but the difference is you have to pay a ridiculous sum of money, and when it runs out, which it will, you have to pay another ridiculous sum of money. But with Saley, every plan is affordable and quite honestly a far better deal. I mean, I can get 20 gigabytes in Japan for just $23. That's literally $27 less than what I paid for my service provider last year for 15 gigabytes. And you can get an exclusive 15% discount. That's right, you can pay even less if you use my link in the description or use code MACWELL on the Saley app. So what are you waiting for? Use Saley for your next trip abroad. Make life easier, get connection faster, and once more use my link or code to get 15% off. During the 1980s and 90s, Indonesia's national team experienced some great success in their region. They reached the semis of the 1986 Asian Games, and then they won gold at the Southeast Asian Games in 1987 and 1991. 5 years later, the Garuda team qualified for their first ever Asian Cup, and although they only got a draw, it was still a memorable tournament thanks to forward Widodo, who scored this ridiculous bicycle kick in their opening match. Indonesia also participated in the inaugural Southeast Asian Cup and lost to Vietnam in the third place match. Then during the 1998 edition, in their last group game, Indonesia and Thailand wanted to avoid playing Vietnam in the knockouts in favor of the easier Singapore. And so with the game deadlocked at 2, defender Mursyid Effendi deliberately scored an own goal to guarantee Singapore were their opponents in the next round. As consequence for this blatant cheating, however, both teams were fined 40k and Effendi was banned from international football forever. And ironically enough, Indonesia would lose to Singapore in the semis. Just to go one step further though, here's the goal that helped Singapore win their first title. God, I love 90s Southeast Asian football. Indonesia's performances improved throughout the 2000s, with the Garuda team reaching the final of the Southeast Asian Cup 4 times between 2000 and 2010. And they lost every single one of them. Throughout that period as well, Indonesia also qualified for 3 consecutive Asian Cups. In 2000, they redeemed their choke against Kuwait in 1996 with a goalless draw in their opener. However, they would finish the tournament without scoring a single goal. 2004 finally saw the Garuda team collect their first victory against Qatar. However, they came up short of advancing after losing to Bahrain 3-1. Indonesia got their revenge in 2007 in front of their home fans, but again fell short of the knockouts after losing to South Korea and Saudi Arabia. The loss to the Saudis in particular was even more painful as they conceded a winner in the 90th minute. The early 2010s were pretty brutal for the Garuda team, who found themselves on a decline. Indonesia missed out on the Asian Cup for the first time since 1996 and then capped off an abysmal World Cup 2014 qualification campaign, losing 10-0 to Bahrain. Behind the scenes though, it was even worse. Backtracking to 2011, there was a massive schism within the PSSI board regarding Indonesia's top flight. It all started when the Indonesian Super League lost its top flight status due to internal disputes with the PSSI. This then led a member of the PSSI board, Sihar Sitoris, to replace the ISL with the new Liga Premier Indonesia, which was originally formed in 2010 by a reform movement. However, midway through the league's inaugural season, it disbanded and the PSSI replaced it with the Indonesian Premier League. But prior to the beginning of the IPL, Sitoris said the competition would be divided into 2 regions and there would be another 6 clubs in the top division. This pissed off numerous association members, and as a result, 14 teams from the IPL moved to the ISL. The Indonesian Super League, by the way, still played, it just wasn't recognized by the PSSI at the time. But this period was known as dualism, which is basically the fact that there were 2 leagues that were trying to fight to become the top flight. And this disrupted Indonesian football significantly, especially financially, with many clubs struggling due to sponsors thinking twice about funding clubs, leading to many associations in both leagues struggling to pay their players. Fortunately, 2 years later, the board kicked Sitoris' nonsensical ass out and reinstated the Indonesian Super League as the top-level league after the IPL disbanded. The PSSI then determined the best 7 teams from the 2013 IPL season would join the ISL following verification. However, after refusing a request to reject 2 clubs' ISL verification from the Indonesian Professional Sports Agency, the PSSI was straight up banned. That was government intervention, which was a big no-no in the eyes of FIFA, who banned Indonesia in 2015 from any footballing activities for a whole year. As a consequence, Indonesia was qualified from World Cup 2018 qualifiers and also 2019 Asian Cup qualifiers. And this saw the Garuda team fall to 191st in the world in 2016. By far the darkest period in the national team's history. The ban though was lifted just in time for the 2016 Southeast Asian Cup, and Indonesia made it all the way to the final, where they lost again. Indonesia then hired head coach Luis Milla for the 2018 edition, but then he f***ed them over, leaving right before the tournament, and Indonesia went on to crash out of the groups with an interim. On the bright side though, Indonesia were once again able to participate in World Cup qualifiers. 2022 in particular. And ahead of the campaign, the federation appointed Simon McManamy, who was responsible for the Miracle of Hanoi in 2010 that triggered a renaissance in Filipino football. Indonesia was hoping that the Scotsman would bring them that same success, but he didn't. The Garuda team lost their first 4 qualifiers, and after a loss to their hated rivals Malaysia, McManamy was sacked at the end of 2019. Indonesia then brought in Shin Tae-yong as the new head coach. Shin Tae-yong was the head coach for South Korea during the 2018 World Cup, where they upsetted Germany. He was also in this ad in 2022. The idea here was that the PSSI could replicate the same success that Vietnam saw after they appointed Korean Park Hang-seo. And just like the beginning of the Park era, Shin Tae-yong's run with Indonesia started terribly. They went winless throughout the rest of 2022 World Cup qualifiers, which included a 5-0 loss to UAE and a following from the Viets. However, a few months later, Shin Tae-yong led the Garuda team to the final of the AFF Championship. Alright, now say it with me. And once again, Indonesia came up short. Despite another heartbreaking loss in the final, Indonesians could be excited about players like Elkan Baggett, Pratama Arhan, and Asnawi Mangkulam. But these were just a couple players from Shin Tae-yong's ultimate plan of prioritizing youth in order to rebuild, revive, and reawaken the sleeping giant that was Indonesia's national team. From 2022 onward, the PSSI and Shin Tae-yong put a lot of importance on the youth teams. Early on, they saw the U19 team just miss out on the knockouts after basically being over by Vietnam and Thailand. But on the bright side though, Shin Tae-yong helped Indonesia qualify for the Asian Cup for the first time since 2007. Then 2023 came, and it was a huge year for Indonesian football. They missed out on the U20 World Cup as host because they refused to let Israel participate, and then missed out on the knockouts in the U20 Asian Cup. However, the U23 team finished runners-up in the U23 AFF Cup and won gold in the Southeast Asian Games for the first time since 1991. This tournament also saw the peak of 19-year-old starlet Marcelino Ferdinand's breakout year. The senior team also played World Cup winners Argentina and impressed a ton, only losing 2-0. Defender Asnawi, who'd always been pretty fearless, was especially praised for his crunching tackle on Garnacho. Then in 2024 so far, Indonesia won the U19 AFF Cup without breaking a sweat, and then finished 4th in the U23 Asian Cup. Oh, and they also qualified for the U20 Asian Cup in 2025. And the process of drawing with Yemen in their last game, they basically eliminated Vietnam. I want to end it all. That was just phase 1 of Indonesia's plan for world dominance though. Their next task was naturalization. According to the United Nations, Indonesia is the 4th most populous country with over 278 million people. And that means a giant diaspora worldwide, especially in the Netherlands. Obviously because of colonialism. Over the decades, there has been a lot of Dutch international players of Indonesian descent. This list is honestly gonna surprise you quite a bit. Roy Mackay, Giovanni van Bronckhorst, Nigel de Jong, and even Robin van Persie. Outside of the Netherlands, there's been players like Belgian international and piss missile merchant Raja Nainggolan. And right now, you have someone like Tiani Reinders starring for the Dutch team. While Indonesia will never be able to poach these types of stars away from the bigger national teams in Europe, there's a ton more below the cream of the crop that are more than capable of improving the Garuda team. Now, Indonesia has had the aim of poaching these types of players since they changed the naturalization policy in 2010. But the process was halted almost entirely because of the crisis in 2015. Fortunately, once things got going again, the Indonesian Federation started naturalizing more players. Jordi Amat of Spain and Duan van Housen were brought in 2022 to mixed success. But then in 2024, the PSSI went into maximum overdrive. For the Asian Cup, Indonesia called up 20-year-old defender Justin Hubner of Wolverhampton Wanderers, 29-year-old right-back Sandy Walsh, who was part of the Dutch team that won the U17 Euros in 2012, he was born in Belgium, which makes things even funnier. 20-year-old midfielder Ivan Jenner, who spent a decent bit of his youth career at Ajax. And 20-year-old forward Rafael Struijk from the Netherlands. All of which made a huge impact as Indonesia beat Vietnam in its second group game, the first time they had overcome their rivals since 2016. They went on to advance to the next round for the first time ever as one of the best third-place teams. And Indonesian fans have Joel Kojo's equalizer versus Oman to thank for that. After he helped Indonesia make history, making it to the knockouts for the first time ever, the Kyrgyz striker basically became a national hero because of this, and his Instagram went from 24 followers to over 250,000. I just want to remind you guys, please Please help. Please help. Then before World Cup qualifier doubleheader versus Vietnam, the Federation naturalized young defenders Nathan Joan and Venezia's Jay Idzes. There was also 29-year-old midfielder Tom Hay, who was a regular starter for Heerenveen, and finally 26-year-old forward Ragnar Oratmangoen, who now plays for a club owned by CR Satoris. Once again, Indonesia reaped the benefits of their new players as they won both games and saw both Oratmangoen and Idzes score. For me, this was hell on earth, and it didn't help when this particular video started haunting my timeline. Get out of my head! Get out of my head! Anyways, the Garuda team eventually went on to advance to the third round of the World Cup qualifiers for the first time in their long history. And right before the beginning of the third round, in came a new naturalized keeper, FC Dallas's Martin Pais. And he was phenomenal in his first 2 games and helped Indonesia collect 2 crucial draws against Saudi Arabia and Australia. Oh, also, Oratmangoen became a fan favorite after he was seen taking zero shit from notorious bully Ali Al-Bulaihi. Despite the historic success, however, there's been quite a bit of debate about the pros and cons of naturalizing this many players. In fact, I'm pretty sure Indonesia broke a record for the most amount of naturalized players in a single squad. On one hand, Indonesia has improved significantly, and now have potential to straight up qualify for the World Cup. However, on the other hand, many are seeing the mass naturalization having a negative impact on the domestic competition and players born in Indonesia. But I disagree, and this is coming from a guy who, on the daily, makes fun of Qatar and China. When I think of naturalization, and I think of the way it could actually be used to have a positive impact on a footballing nation, I think Indonesia has done that really well. For one, instead of naturalizing some random Brazilians or some random dude named Sergio Aguero, Indonesia is naturalizing players that are of Indonesian descent. I'm totally fine with naturalization just as long as the actual player has a connection to the country and not just has played there for 4 or 5 years. I'm looking at you, Vietnam. I don't care if he looks good. Don't do it. Another thing is that most of these naturalized players are very young and are either playing in bigger Asian clubs or up in Europe. And to address the concerns that this negatively impacts the youth, it really doesn't, because youth players have actually gone out and said that they welcome this kind of competition. Because at the end of the day, a lot of people see naturalization as a shortcut, and it usually is just used as a shortcut. But Indonesia's approach has looked at it a lot differently. I see it more as a movement to encourage more competitiveness to get into the Indonesian national team. However, Indonesia need to make sure they don't make the same mistake as Vietnam and completely forget about the domestic competitions. But I feel like that won't be as big of a problem, seeing how Indonesia actually has like a club culture, like multiple clubs have a lot of fans, an actual passionate fan base. Unlike Vietnam, where I really cannot say the same. To conclude though, Indonesia's national team is a sleeping giant that has finally been awakened. Qualification to World Cup 2026 may be thinking a little too ambitious, especially this early on into the third round, but come 2030, I think Indonesia has a really good chance to return to the World Cup for the first time since 1938, and for the first time as Indonesia. Their core consists of mostly young, talented players, and they keep naturalizing even more as the PSSI has just brought in Maes Hilgers, who helped Twente draw with United recently. And while I've mentioned his name multiple times already, I cannot stress to you enough how good Marcelino Ferdinand is at just 20 years old, and he's only going to get better. And gluing this all together to help make this success even possible is their fantastic coach Shin Tae-young, who has given this team a gritty identity to put up fights against some of Asia's best. And I know I've said that a lot with Vietnam, but this Indonesian side is different. It's not just the coach carrying the team, this is a full-on unit, carrying equal amounts of weight. I hate Indonesia's national team, by the way. It pains me to even say any of this. But it's true. They're on the rise. They're growing. Honestly, they've finally reached their untapped potential. But in all seriousness, if this trajectory keeps going, Indonesia could be consistent dark horses like Uzbekistan for the years to come. The sky is the limit for this football crazy country. So yeah, I know some people have wanted me to make a video about Indonesia's football for like God knows how long. Honestly, I think I saw a tweet of someone like celebrating with a screenshot from 3 years ago, which is insane that you have that screenshot. But yeah, you know, maybe since I've now confronted my demons, things will be a little bit better, especially since the AFF Cup is pretty close. Anyways, you know, please help me get this follow back from my queen. Please. Listen, I give you big positive Indonesia video you help me get follow back. You know, I feel like this is a fair trade. But of course, though, a massive shout out to all our members, including Janusz Badasz, Chupas, Brazilian Fury, Respect the Jeff, Ufman JN, Habakkuk, Jeremiah Owusu Ajiman, Django, Sexy Asian Diddler, Adnazir Makalankam, Alex Rod, Ulta, Miguel Munoz, Return Fire, Rory Burns, Slatterkit, Sniffer, Taku Okafan, The Cypriot 35, Not Windows 95 Man, Kentra Agacha, Big Boris the Baby Eater II, Kerbo, Unkwell, St. Terrence, Sylvia Tistrus, Ryan Jans, Wise Orange, Rashford Enthusiast, Cocosaurus Rex, James Braun, Samu, Just MRC, Cheesebait, Cooper Rory, The Somali Pirate, Claymore Roomba, Windor Gel, M4 Dusta, Finn Likes Rugby More, Davox, The Portugeiser, TPSK25, Polar Protos, Von Fan, Lucian Von Croix, Ethan Bennett Loves Kavicha, Gazegos Beshakivics, Monotengo Faye, Adrian, A Ghostly Owl, Coney Wolves, Mutanai, Nava, Chris Visconsi, Dominic Griffin, Kyler Krebs, Mohammed Altanib, Benish, Patrick Barley, Rashford God 5, Raspberry Ale, subscribe to Tennyton, and Unbroken Persona. If you'd like to become a member, there'll be a link down below in the description and up in the annotations. You can follow me on Twitter if you want, follow me on Instagram if you like, please help me. You can also follow me on Twitch, where I hopefully will be able to have enough time before I go to Asia to do a charity stream for the victims of the typhoon in Vietnam, and also potentially the victims of the Western Carolina floods. But until then, I'll see you guys.